All right, guys. Hey there. Welcome to your adding and subtracting mixed numbers refresher. So if you're watching this video, you are about to get a refresher on how to add or subtract mixed numbers. So as we learned in class with Mrs. Bowers, there are a few steps that we need to take in order to be successful with adding or subtracting mixed numbers. Here I have an example. The example gives us the anecdote that Ming has a goal to jog 4.5 miles each day. On Monday, she jogged 5 9/10 miles. By how much did she exceed her goal for that day? So first we need to understand what this word problem is telling us and what it is asking us. So I see obviously that there are mixed numbers here, but what do I do with them? Well, taking out the numbers, let's think about this in context. So Ming is going to go jogging every day. She has a goal. On Monday, she jogged more than her goal. So the question's asking, how much more did she go over her goal? That word exceed means to go over or go past. So the question wants to know, how far, how much more did she exceed her goal for that day? So if her goal was 4.5 miles and she jogged for 5 9/10, we're looking for the difference. By how much more did she exceed her goal? Now, the first thing you're probably asking yourself is, okay, well, where do I even begin? So here's the problem. We cannot subtract fractions that have different units or different denominators. Tenths are far different from halves. So it's important that we make equivalent fractions. That's going to make our subtracting so much easier. So the first step in this would be to make equivalent fractions. And how we do that is we look at the denominators we have. We have 10 and 2. And I need to figure out what is the least common multiple. The acronym for this is LCM. So we want to think about the multiples that 2 and 10 have in common, and then that least common multiple will become our common denominator. Multiples, when we're in 5th grade, guys, so easy to do. We've been learning how to skip count for years. So when we do the multiples of 2, we know we got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, so on. We'll list the multiples of 10, 10, 20, 30, 40, and so on. Well, we don't want to just choose any old common multiple. We want the least common multiple. So what is a multiple that 2 and 10 have in common? That is the least or the lowest number. In this case is 10. So now I can make my equivalent fractions because I have a common denominator identified. So when I rewrite 5 9/10, I'm going to rewrite it using the LCM as the common denominator. In this case, we went from tenths to tenths, so this fraction won't change. But in the case of 4 and 1/2, this will change. The LCM was 10. That's going to be our common denominator. And now this part tends to be where a lot of 5th graders get a little hung up. So as you can see here, we went from halves to tenths. So think, how did I go from halves to tenths? I multiplied by 5, right? And there is a very important rule when we deal with fractions and in common denominators. Whatever you do to the denominator, you have to do to the numerator. So in this case, the numerator is 1. Remember from that 1/2. So the numerator is 1. And since I multiplied the denominator by 5, I have to multiply the numerator by 5. 1 times 5 is 5. So my numerator here will be 5. So 4 and 1/2 is also equivalent to 4 and 5/10. Now that these denominators are the same, now I can subtract without hesitation. I always suggest to my 5th graders to subtract the whole numbers first. In this case, 5 take away 4 leaves me with 1 whole. And then we can subtract the whole numbers. The fractions. 9/10 minus 5/10. In this case, would leave me with 4/10. Now, some of you might be thinking, great, I have a final answer. Ming ran an extra 1 and 4/10 miles past her goal. Beautiful. But I have an issue here with this final answer. My issue here is that 4/10 is not in simplest form. We want to simplify this fraction to its simplest terms. But how do we do that? How do I take 4/10 and ensure that it is indeed or is not in its simplest form? In this case, we need to know the factors of 4 and 10. Factors, remember, are numbers you multiply together to get a product. So if my product is 4, let's think of some factors or numbers we can multiply together that equal 4. 1 times 4 is 4. 2 times 2 is 4. Now let's list the factors of 10. If 10 is the product, what numbers can I multiply together to equal 10? 1 times 10 is 10. 2 times 5 is 10. And that's it. So this next step, in order to simplify, I need to find the greatest common factor. The acronym being GCF. So I'm going to go through the factors of 4 and 10 and find a factor that they both have in common. They both have a 1 in common. They both have a 2 in common. But you know what? They don't both have a 4 in common, or a 10 in common, or a 5 in common. So in this case, the greatest common factor is 2, because although 1 is a common factor, it's not greater than 2. 2 is the greatest common factor. Now that I know the greatest common factor, I'm going to divide the numerator and the denominator by the GCF. In this case is 2. This is just simple 3rd grade division. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So revisiting my final answer here, 4/10 in its simplest terms is 2/5. So 1 and 4/10 in simplest form is 1 and 2/5 miles. So this is our final answer. All right, guys, now I would like you to go off and do some independent practice on this on your own. You can either complete a mission in Zern, or if you would like some more Go Math practice with this exact same skill, in your Go Math books, You can practice this skill more on pages 383, 384, 385, 386, 387, and 388 in your Go Math books. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining me for today's refresher on adding and subtracting mixed numbers.